Memory transcription subject, Captain Calsim, Crocodile Alliance Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 17, 2136. Renewed energy surged through my veins as the fleet coasted within striking distance of the human armada. This was the most important skirmish of our lives. The Terran forces were a ragtag bunch, consisting of a primary cluster of recycled Venmal vessels, a few of their own slow behemoths, and a handful that looked too small to host a proper crew. Our homogeneous warships had the advantage of both conformity and technology. Scans of Earth offered some interesting insights, as we registered several million life signatures in underground structures. I conferred on this data with the fleet, and we agreed to nail those havens first. Human bunkers were not designed to withstand direct antimatter blasts. Once their key hideouts were demolished, major population centers were the second priority. Orion advance, ready your plasma guns on the Terran formation, I chirped into the comms. Follow this 5 seconds later with a generous donation of missiles. Everyone will fire on my mark. The radio crackled to life with a reply. How certain are we that we can defeat these predators? It's a simple math equation. We all act together, and we have more guns than they have ships. The Terrans held their position as we coordinated our target locks. Jayla aimed our railgun at a gargantuan warship, which already registered 5 others pinpointing it. Overkill wasn't the worst idea, to ensure that the largest enemies didn't survive. My sensors warned that our fleet was being target-locked in return, and a spurt of munitions were seconds from impact. Fire! I screeched. The lights show around me was a marvelous sight, with energy beams zipping between us and the humans. I watched as our target was sundered by various incisions, capping off the largest threat before it began. Other Predator craft fell to the sheer onslaught, their numbers couldn't hold a candle to ours. We sustained some damage to our front lines, though many vessels that were hit by the enemy were able to press on. The ships we selected to lead the way were Farsal armor-heavy vessels, by design. They didn't pack as much in terms of weaponry, but they could absorb more force than the standard craft. In other words, those craft shielded the rest of us. The surviving human vessels were either nursing grave wounds, or had pulled off lucky evasive maneuvers. I estimated we'd taken out 40% of our opponents with the first strike. The other fronts must be enjoying similar success. The Crocodile fleet wasn't showing any mercy, and showered missiles at the Predators. The hominids left a trail of interceptors behind them, desperately trying to muster some fight. This is almost unfair, ganging up on such a primitive species. No wonder they wouldn't engage directly, maybe it was as much pragmatism as cowardice. The enemy pilots seemed to realize they were falling back toward Earth's atmosphere. They had no choice but to turn and fight, or surrender orbital supremacy. Our allies were encouraged by their concession. We charged forward with righteous determination. I could feel my own crew's qualms about battling predators dissipating. I tossed my beak for emphasis. Don't let your guard down. Predators will try anything if they're desperate enough. Sir, the smaller craft are shooting kinetics and plasma at us, while charging at max speed. Thing is, I'm not detecting any life signs, Jayla chittered. Have the humans found a way to hide from our sensors? They might be concealing some bunkers. Confusion rippled through my plumage. I doubt even humans made advances against technology they barely understand. The pilots could have just ejected and left the vacant ship on a collision course. You didn't listen to what I said. The craft are still firing on us and making course corrections. There has to be a pilot, she protested. My talons tightened around my perch. Those Terran ships didn't seem to be steering on a preset course. Before my eyes, one of them whirled out of the way of a plasma beam. It performed a total thrust reversal on a dime. I didn't know how anyone could calculate that fast, or how the lapse in gravity wouldn't cause a pilot to pass out. Hell, the G-force should crush an organic skull. While predators in movies were nigh unkillable, that was not reality. Those maneuvers were impossible. The only conclusion was that those spacecraft were flying themselves and killing based off some sort of algorithm. How could a computer ever learn strategy? And even if it could, who would risk implementing that function into its programming? I leaned over the comms. The smaller craft are fighting without human input. I believe they're ordered to crash into us at max velocity. Focus on them. Hundreds of rail guns pivoted toward the threat, and a slew of missiles greeted the pilotless craft as well. If our readings were correct, these robots seemed reliant on nuclear power. The plasma jets they unleashed at close range were tied to those systems. The humans had skipped right to inflicting the most damage possible. A single hit burned through even the Farsal ship's hardened exterior. It's actually quite clever to not have to worry about losing pilots. They don't have to fuss over containing reactions from weapons or expending power on life support. The Terran automatons were decimated when we managed to connect, but they reacted quickly to our threats. We had to focus multiple warships on a single one to make sure it couldn't calculate us to death. Several reached their targets and rammed nose first into the armored front line. Our hardiest ships took significant losses. The humans were determined to take them out of the equation. Jayla singled out aggressive predator vessels and provided suppressive fire for our allies. We advanced deeper into their territory, knowing human fervor would render them reckless. Their crater-pocked moon passed alongside us, a landmark of our goal. Defense satellites minced us with lasers and gunfire, but they were idle targets to be taken out. The predators were retreating in gradual increments, and their scattered formation was on the brink of collapse. These stalling attempts, inventive or not, were futile. In a few thousand kilometers, we could commence the orbital bombardment. "Sir, the humans are broadcasting a message fleet-wide. Should I discard it?" the comms officer asked. I sighed. Let their last words be heard. It's the right thing to do. Federation fleet, we advise you to turn back now. We took the liberty of informing the Arxer of your departure. The audio transmission had no video, but the booming voice was jarring even without a visual. If you return now, you might arrive in time to save your planets. You'll need the artillery you're going to expend on Earth. We will accept your surrender and allow you to return unimpeded. A stunned silence swept across the bridge. Every crew member was undoubtedly recalling their home and the people we left behind. Nishtal was our birth planet, a marshy paradise with floating cities and breathtaking algae blooms. It didn't surprise me that the humans would guarantee it fell alongside Earth. That was predatory spite. But the thought of returning to Nishtal, to see every still tower and ceremonial nest obliterated, cracked a small piece of me. That wasn't even considering how the Arxer would ravage our population. What egoistic predator didn't take prizes of its hunts, after all? Friendly radio chatter cropped up again. The Arxer are coming for us. I'm sorry for listening to one of those fiends, but we have to save our homes. She's right, another captain agreed. Shouldn't we at least send the part of the fleet back? We never should have left Nishtal unguarded. Take heart, my friends. The humans are bluffing, we have them scared shitless. I didn't believe the primates were fibbing, but this mission had to be finished. Whatever the cost. Do you think it's possible to talk to the Arxer? The predators want to manipulate our empathy and use it against us. The last part was true, though I found it improbable they'd stake that wager on a falsehood. The Terrans hoped they could wield our compassion for our brethren against us. They probably understood how we felt, seeing our homes vulnerable and under siege. This was a cost I could barely find the strength or the logic to commit to. Odds were, a few hours wouldn't make a difference on this scale. Our fleet would be disorganized, and short of ammo, whether we accomplished the objective or not. The question was whether any other species could survive through our sacrifice. But what if they are telling the truth? Came the retort across Federation channels. I lowered my eyes. Then we'll be out of here in a few hours. If the Terrans survive, they will just join forces with the Arxer. Humans are untenably violent, and they'll want revenge. There is no choice but to eradicate Earth. The fleet rallied behind my words, finding their conviction restored. There was nothing to stop the humans from following our subspace trail and unleashing their retribution on our cities. It was far too late now to walk back any attack. Predators didn't forgive or relinquish grudges. The first bomber group barreled toward the line of Terran ships, who were behaving strangely. I watched as they backed away and left massive gaps in their formation. Why were they giving our vessels a path to break through? Either they were extraordinarily cocky in anticipating our surrender, or this was a trap. Thousands of missiles slammed into our spacecraft seconds later, hailing from the direction of their moon. The explosives demolished any ships they touched. I was stunned to see radiation amidst the readings. These items could only take out one ship without shock waves, but the missile contacts numbered half of our vessels. The fact that the Predators stocked that many nukes on Luna. Why do the humans have such an oversized supply of city killers? What reason could they have to point them at their own world from above? Deploy all missile countermeasures. I shrieked into the comms. Destroy every structure on their moon. I'm sure that has to be the last of it, but just as the Federation fleet began compensating for the nuclear deluge, the humans deployed another staggering missile wave. This salvo was also in the thousands, begging the question of just how large their atomic cache was. No wonder our scientists thought the apes irradiated their world. It wasn't for lack of trying. Jayla spotted a military complex near us and dropped an antimatter bomb onto the lunar coordinates. As much as I hated to waste extermination supplies, I didn't question the necessity of stopping the nuclear assault. Every bomber who forged ahead was getting buried in radioactive warheads. There were only so many explosives we could shrug off at once. The Terran defenders camped by the orbital threshold, hurling plasma at anything that moved. Thousands of our ships had succumbed to the mind-boggling missile count. We were still trying to swat the remnants away. With our numbers whittled down, the humans smelled blood. Our attack force suddenly seemed a bit more manageable. I flapped my wings in irritation. We have to find a way through the wall, and quickly. Any suggestions, Jayla? Well, sir, there is a small gap by the northern polar cap. The Predators are overextended, my sociopathic second replied. I blinked. Good thinking. That is where we can break through and pick our mark. My mind wandered as I relayed assignments. The first item was delegating our quickest ships to rush through the enemy opening. Our entire lead bombing unit was atomized, so the swift cruisers were the obvious replacements. I figured the humans would try to stop any advance. The second our people started moving, we needed to block the Predators from sealing the gap. Earth looked depressingly beautiful as I studied the viewport. White clouds formed a veil over tan landmasses, which were divided by rich oceans. I was relieved that this skirmish was almost over. Savages or not, it was impossible not to feel sorry for the humans. There was exquisiteness and wonder in what they had built. And I knew there were plenty of us left to get the job done. It's been an honor serving with each of you. Let's finish this, so we can all go home, I croaked over comms. Federation cruisers bolted toward a vacant space in the Terran formation and pushed their engines past recommended limits. Our warship joined the masses surging forward. The walls rattled as we careened into position. The non-essential ships formed a metal shield between the cruisers and the humans gunning to intercept them. An angular Terran behemoth sauntered toward us, not even slowing down as we hovered in its path. My NAV officer took evasive maneuvers and ducked their uncontrolled plasma and missiles. The humans weren't taking the time to aim. I could almost hear the predators begging us to stop, and guilt tugged at my heart. The massive ship launched dozens of smaller craft from its hangar bay, but they were spliced up by our kinetics on arrival. Those scrawny fighters were easy pickings for us. The spacecraft carrier found itself target-locked by a murderous Jayla. The female crocodile showed no emotion as she directed a missile through a hangar, circumventing its armor. Yes. She leapt up with enthusiasm as the Predator ship erupted into pieces. It's funny, isn't it? We're blocking them from getting to the real target, and these humans are forced to watch. An appropriate somberness overtook the bridge as the rest of us processed her words. There was nothing amusing about what we were slated to witness. It was difficult to remember that it was just business. 15 Federation cruisers slipped past the humans, with the timely help of the Allied fleet. They crossed the final kilometers to orbital range and scoped out the exposed planet below. I watched as the Predators flung everything they had at the attackers, knowing full well they were out of reach. Time seemed to freeze around us. This was a moment that would reside in my nightmares. The payload struck home after a painstaking eternity. Bright flashes dotted Earth's continents, and the antimatter purification wiped away our first human targets. Memory transcription subject, Slanik, Venlol Space Corps. Date, standardized human time, October 17, 2136. The Terran drone monitoring station was set aboard a massive boat, for some reason. I guessed it was because a moving target would be difficult for the crocodile to nail from orbital range. More than likely, they would need to dive through the atmosphere to take us out. My friends had terrestrial aircraft and defenses waiting for that moment. The humans judged that I was better equipped for an oversight role, scanning communication channels for anything helpful. Despite his protests, Marcel was still sidelined due to injuries as well. It was a safe assumption that his assignment was more to calm me or to jump in if I froze. There were dozens of other Predators in the control room, each itching to be in the stars. Instead, we all watched the battle unfold from behind a computer monitor. As the first Federation bombers broke through, everyone realized how quickly our defense was falling apart. There was a seriousness I'd never seen in humans, even in the darkest situations. Why couldn't they have fled Earth, like I told them to? Our satellites registered 42 impacts, some on major population centers. General Jones addressed the station's crew in a solemn tone. I've assigned each of you a local news feed to listen in on. We need to keep track of which cities have been lost. I watched as the American officer placed a handful of red pins on a map. Her drone program hadn't quite worked out every aspect of space warfare, but its hasty deployment was the only thing keeping us in the game now. Teaching the automated programs to differentiate between hundreds of alien ship classes, space debris, and subspace disruptions was no small feat, I was told. My red-haired friend opened a news stream on a side monitor and traced a clawless hand across his facial scars. The image I saw out of my periphery made me want to grab my blinders, but I forced myself to look. It was an aerial view of rubble in all directions, a sprawling metropolis turned into a wasteland by antimatter. Of Mexico City and New York City rocked North America. The Raven Rock bunker complex has also been demolished, killing essential U.S. personnel. However, no region has gone unscathed. Asia has sustained an unequal share of the detonations. Initial reports confirm mass devastation in Karachi, Tokyo, Dhaka, Shanghai, and Mumbai, several highly populous cities. The seat of the Chinese government, Beijing, is yet untouched, though it is expected to be a future target. On the European front, Switzerland's extensive bunker network has made it the target of multiple bombing deposits. Their entire population, as well as 1 million refugees from EU neighbors, are packed in various shelters. Meanwhile, the Turkish government denies reports of a hit to Istanbul, despite satellite imagery suggesting its fall. In the southern hemisphere, contact has been lost with Sao Paulo, Lima, and Buenos Aires. Africa is reporting impacts to Kinshasa, Lagos, and Cairo, while Oceania mourns the fall of Sydney. Conservative casualty estimates are in the tens of millions, planet-wide. How can the Federation do this, Slanek? Why do we deserve to die? Marcel's eyes watered, and his voice was a scratchy whisper. We're just people, like you, all we wanted was peace. I pinned my ears against my head. I'm truly sorry. I wish we could do more to help. These are civilian hubs. There was no reason for any of this to happen, not even their own worlds under fire could make them stop. Millions are dead because of our eyes, because we're so fucking different to you. Despite the anger in his words, I could see that my friend was on the brink of a breakdown. The UN fleet was being pummeled on all fronts, and every screen depicted ship explosions. My heart clenched as I realized Tyler might already be dead. The tall flesh-eater was signed onto a spacecraft carrier crew. Human artillery was depleted too, despite their unsanctimonious love of nuclear weapons. My resilient predator can't give up now, can he? It's like Marcel is admitting defeat. I know, Mark, I said gently. Listen, no matter how much this hurts, we have to keep fighting until the last settlement falls. If we're gonna die today, we better take a lot of them with us. Pure hatred glimmered in his hazel eyes. Oh, you didn't have to tell me that. If humanity glues itself back together, I hope we kill every last one of them. You don't mean that, my friend. Noah's Venlil are with you to the end. For whatever that's worth. The Venlil only had a few hundred ships left in reserve after donating the bulk of our fleet to humanity. Nonetheless, Governor Tarva ordered the majority of our remnants to Earth's defense. They were intermingled with human units now, playing supporting roles. There were less than 50 warships remaining behind at Venlil Prime. Both sides knew the Republic government sent more than we could spare. My gaze focused on one Venlil grouping, whose human front line had succumbed to a brazen crocodile charge. The Predators committed themselves a bit too heavily to stopping the first bombers, and still failed in that regard. The Republic ships banded together on instinct, which made them a larger target on sensors. I was stunned by how little the enemy hesitated to dispatch them. This Federation onslaught seemed just as predatory as the humans, if not more. It was like they didn't consider Venlil people anymore. We couldn't just freeze and rely on herd mentality, as our comrades were being murdered. Venlil support, you need to stay mobile, Marcel growled into his headset, clearly noticing the same issue. Do not let yourself become a sitting target. Call for UN backup. Your allies will find a way to help you if we can. A few Terran ships overheard the chatter and ducked their engagements to help the Venlil grouping. The Republic's plasma aim was noticeably worse than the Federation's. The prey crews must be panicking. Even with my extra training, would be terrified in their position. They were parked in the path of certain death. The crocodile ships clashed with the battered UN reinforcements, while the Venlil threw in supporting missiles. The humans were flying like crazed maniacs. At least on the manned ships. I think the Predators found the energy to protect us, because they realized our opponents would break through otherwise. We might be the weakest species in the galaxy, but at least it's extra ships to stand in the way. I should be with the other Venlil, fighting. The humans were churning out explosives and gunfire, and the Venlil kept aiding from a safe distance. The Federation must have realized that those campers were prey-crewed vessels, not predators. Several enemies rerouted their trajectories to cruise through our timid offerings, instead of searching for an opening. The Terrans swerved to meet the hostiles, and concentrated plasma fire on the largest warships. Heavy Federation classes had the most explosives, so they were the priority. Earth's innocuous shape loomed behind the Venlil defenders. With armed vehicles barreling toward them, the urge to flee must be overwhelming. I donned my own headset, contemplating what Sarah had taught me. Venlil ships, you are much stronger than you think you are. The Federation is wrong about us. We are not just the galaxy's laughingstock. Push past your limits. Hold the line. Several Venlil were retreating before the crocodile overtook them, but scrambled back into position. None of us wanted humanity's home to suffer further harm. Most had come to love the arboreal predators, and love was as good a motivation as hatred. My people clawed back more than the crocodile expected, though the aggressors cut the Venlil ships down in droves. A few Federation craft slipped through on that front, as friendly forces succumbed to the larger assault. My heart sank when I saw nobody was chasing the leader bomber. The other Terran groups were too far away and otherwise occupied. About 20 missiles were fast-tracked to Earth, which I knew meant millions more casualties. That was a statistic too staggering to comprehend. If the Venlil didn't make a last stand, it would have been 100 detonations. It's about mitigating the damage at this point, and praying for a miracle. The crocodile were clever enough to allocate a few warships to guard their rear flank. The UN's Gojid Liberation Fleet had attempted to hit them from behind, but found an armed unit waiting at the ready. Had the circumstances been less dire, I think the humans may have noted how the birds were a worthy foe. The Terran ship count was ticking down to 1,000 on our readout. The early stages of the battle were catastrophic. The Federation still had several thousand vessels at their disposal, and pressed ahead with unchecked aggression. Our predators were running out of ships and tricks. They could only be so many places in the vastness of space at once. The enemy bombers trickled through in small groupings, and that meant the death toll continued to rise. I couldn't imagine how Marcel felt. The red-haired human was holding his head in his hands. He slapped my tail away when I wrapped it around his wrist. Terran civilization, everything he ever knew, was slipping away in the span of an hour. I jostled his arm again. "Hey, Marcel, please help me. There's 500 new contacts from the direction of your colony Mars. I don't know who to notify." I was aware that I was supposed to alert General Jones, but I thought feeling useful might do my friend some good. The vegetarian needed to snap out of his misery and turn his thoughts away from Nolia and Lucy. He must be feeling guilt for sending them to a bunker. Honorable predators should go down fighting, not wallowing in self-pity. "Did you hear me?" I demanded. "There's more ships inbound, of a standard Federation make." A second wave of Federation monsters. Wasn't the first one enough? He spat. I couldn't blame him for that reaction. The Terrans had no spare manpower to allocate to a fresh armada. But there had to be some attempt to stop the newcomers, even if it was woefully insufficient. Seeing that my human wasn't going to be helpful, I flagged down General Jones. She studied the data for a full minute, poring over the details. The American officer frowned. "It's difficult to lock on the signal, but it appears they're trying to hail us." "Shall I put it on the main screen?" an attendant asked. "Yes, patch us through the interference. If the feds are offering us a surrender, I think we have no choice but to accept it, unconditionally." The occupants of the monitoring station turned our attention to the central video feed. General Jones positioned herself in front of a camera, a bitter look in her eyes. It was unclear why the Federation would reverse their stance on total extinction. Wasn't their only demand every human dead? A quadrupedal animal appeared on screen, and Jones' expression morphed to surprise. Those rounded ears and soft brown fur were Zurolian features. The captain shied away from the camera, clearly having never seen a human before. "Gods, don't eat us. Please." I mean," the Zurolian stammered. "Don't shoot us." Jones' lips curved down. "What are you doing here? This is an active war zone." "Friendly. Friendly. We'll leave." The quadruped was struggling to string coherent thoughts together. I jumped out my seat and wagged my tail at Jones in a "go-away" gesture. The human general didn't take the hint, so I gave her leg an insistent shove. Understanding flashed in her eyes, and she ducked out of view of the camera. I flicked my ears reassuringly. "Cerulean officer, please inform us of your intent. Nobody is going to hurt you." Chow Sun, wanted, begged the Prime Minister to help humans. Unrelenting. He said they were nice, but they just look hungry to me. So hungry. Hope flickered back into Joan's pupils. Wait a second. You're here to help us. Why is it growling at me? Venlil, you've got to get out of there. I exhaled in frustration and glanced at Marcel for support. My human's eyes were a million light-years away, red around the rims. His lips never moved, not even a forced snarl. That brokenness gave me the resolution I needed. That is just how humans talk, because they have deeper vocal ranges. There's nothing to be afraid of, I said. We need urgent assistance at several locations. Help would be very much appreciated. The Cerulean tilted his head. I know what my orders are, but won't these predators attack anything in sight? They're in aggression mode. And this is a quarter of our entire fleet. We're no military species. Cerulean, we've already lost millions of lives. Innocent lives. A rare hint of emotion crept in Joan's voice, though she quickly steadied herself. I promise we want nothing more than to protect Earth. I will relay word that you're friendlies. Please, if you believe in peace, help us. The quadruped's gaze darted to the viewport, where his formation was closing in on the Federation attackers. His expression was conflicted. I was worried that he might go against his orders. This captain acted predator-averse, and even showed disgust at the sight of a human. The call was terminated without any clarification. Terran ship numbers continued to dwindle, while the Ceruleans sat and watched. General Jones sighed, and highlighted the new vessels as alien friendlies. That was a necessary gamble. The Federation had yet to notice the newcomers' approach. I prayed that they would intercede on Earth's behalf. Memory transcription subject, Captain Calsim, Crocodile Alliance Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 17, 2136. The Predator's formation was disintegrating, and it looked likely we would secure victory within the hour. I considered broadcasting an apology to the surface, once Earth's space fleet was exhausted. The unfortunate civilians knew they were witnessing the last day of their civilization. Did the humans not deserve the solace of an explanation? There was a part of me that wondered if we could have found another way. The issue was their growth and reproduction, which would be exponential if left unchecked. Maybe we could have isolated any humans who surrendered on an abandoned world, sterilizing them to prohibit breeding. That way, the existing primates could live out the rest of their lifespan, without the option to prowl the stars. What if there was another path to achieve extinction, without the deaths of billions? Calsim, such thinking is counterproductive. Zarn, any update on Thion? I asked, hoping for a brief distraction. The doctor took several seconds to respond. The first officer is in a medically induced coma, but I've managed to freeze the brain swelling. He'll live, though I can't predict the long-term effects, sir. Some tension was lifted from my wings, with the assurance that the Farsal would survive. This entire crew needed a piece of good news. We were set to join the next bombing rush. All remaining Federation ships were partaking in this charge. This was the chance to strike down every last craft the humans had limping above world. By the way, I've quite enjoyed the show from my little window. I much preferred it when we thought all of these nasty creatures were dead, Zarn added. Whatever your predator delusions, you should be proud of yourself, Captain. I tossed my beak in disdain, not dignifying that statement with a response. Relations between myself and the TACCAN practitioner would be much better if he kept his opinions quiet. My talons swiped through the screens, ensuring that our payloads were in working order. All systems were operational on board. There was just a small dip in our shield capacity. Our vessel fell into the rear of the Advance, and navigations increased our acceleration. We would have control over the final targets, which might require flexibility. My expertise would come in handy, assigning relative importance to locations. Why did it feel so wrong to speak about Terran settlements in those terms? Thoughts of Nishtal's impending invasion weighed on my mind too. There might not be any home to go back to. Crocodile civilization would be the last casualty to Terran brutality, but that didn't ease the horror of it. We might be forgotten by the Federation within decades, just another species that fell to the Arxer. I hoped historians would appreciate our sacrifice. Alarms flashed on sensors, snapping me out of my torturous musings. Several Allied vessels had been picked apart by precision strikes, right beside us. The rear flank was blindsided by hundreds of blips, who were darting in between our flotilla. The newcomers were trying to shove their way to the Terran fortifications. Ready weapons, and fire at anything we don't recognize. I screeched. Where did these bastards come from? They're a little late if they're humans. My comms technician shuffled nervously. I just finished decoding communications between a Terran command post and these vessels. The Xerulians sent military assistance. You've got to be joking. The Xerulians have a fledgling, erroneous association with the humans. What have the Predators ever done for them? Jayla snickered. Never mind that, Captain. I'm pretty sure the Galactic Institute of Medicine and their 20 ships aren't going to tip the scales either way. That's not the point. Comms, I need to know these developments ahead of time. He's right. Stars forbid the Yodel show up with a trebuchet next. The sociopath feigned a swooning motion. Then we're really screwed. I huffed in irritation, watching as our ship turned to face a Xerulian hostile. The quadrupeds gave us a wide berth and dodged Jayla's errant plasma beam. Several Federation captains were calling out conflicting orders on the comms, which led to disarray. Exhaustion was making it difficult to recall foreign military techniques, so I couldn't find solid advice to offer. The Terran fleet were advancing on our front lines, capitalizing on the breakdown of command. Cursing the Xerulian fools. I barked orders to pull back and regroup within the lunar orbit. This was a waste of precious time that could be vital to the defense of our home. We weren't going to leave an extermination half done. We'll get our bearings and charge at Earth again. Perhaps we can still accomplish this quickly. The Federation reassembled, adjusting for the fresh reinforcements. The numerical advantage was still slanted to our side, and prey wouldn't fight half as well as a human. However, it might be difficult for the crew to fire on Xerulians. We had accepted that the Venlo were reduced to predatory thralls, but this race was a new convert. The Xerulians chose their side, and they chose wrong. I know it seems harsh to strike them down, but they put themselves here. I surveyed the expressions of my crew, noting how distraught they looked. If the Arxer are truly attacking our homes, this might cost us our entire civilization. Everything is on the line, there is no time for bargaining. Jayla hissed in frustration as she realized our missiles were depleted. Perhaps she shouldn't have been so liberal with their usage. The plasma railgun had recharged, but I wasn't sure how low our gas supply was running. We couldn't afford to have only kinetics at our disposal. Discretion was required going forward. The Xerulian fleet fell in beside the humans, though they seemed wary of drawing too close. There was no basis for those fears. The risk of Terrans attacking their allies right now was negligible. These predators were too smart to betray useful assets that Earth needed so desperately. They weren't just raving beasts. Sir, more unknown ships incoming. There's, my comms technician trailed off. I blinked. Where from? How many? Speak. T-thousands. The subspace trails are from all over the place. My confusion intensified, and I attempted to stave off my sleep-deprived stupor. The humans didn't have many Federation allies. To my knowledge, only 6 could respond in time. 2 of those partners were already here. The neutral powers had no intent of interfering either way, since it would simplify their stance if we succeeded. But no singular Federation race had that many ships at their beck and call. This had to be some sort of group or alliance. Maybe these were weaker species that had been coerced. Others might give into cheap tactics if their home worlds were held hostage. That, or the humans had found a way to deceive our sensors. These contacts could be decoys meant to sow confusion. How would such a trick even work, though? The comms analyst scratched her crown. "Sir, we're picking up a looping transmission from this mystery fleet. It's directed toward Earth. Putting it on screen now." My beak nearly split open as the video feed materialized. Those slit pupils were the unmistakable identifier of the Arxer. I was uncertain whether their eye shape was solely for ambush hunting, or if they allowed the Greys to stalk at dusk. It made human vision seem like love beacons by comparison. "This is Chief Hunter Isif," the reptile clicked. "Forgive our tardiness, but we did request that you disable FTL disruptors multiple times. Hang in there, humans. We are here to help." A few crewmates were sobbing from the beast's projection. Even an extermination officer like myself was paralyzed by those dagger-like teeth jutting from its truncated maw. The length of its gullet, visible as it spoke, was a ghastly sight. Why were the Greys not laughing at the loss of life on Earth? Those demons delighted in death and suffering. They went out of their way to cause it. It didn't seem within their behavioral pattern to save a weaker sapient, even if that species were predators. I don't understand any of this. How are the Terrans responding? I stammered. The comms technician pecked away at her station. Lots of chatter from the human coalition. It doesn't appear their command was expecting the Arxer, though that could be staged for the benefit of their less vile friends. Shit! The Zeruleans and the Venmal can't be happy about this, can they? No, sir. The Zeruleans are demanding to know why the Arxer are here, and the Venmal are asking why they were not informed. The Terran response? The humans claim they didn't invite the Greys, but aren't in a position to reject their help. They suggest that their allies go with it, unless they'd prefer to fight the reptilians too. Their response to the Arxer offered thanks, and insisted those 2 prey races are friendly. Of course that's what the clever monkeys said. They excel in manipulation tactics, and they're using both parties. I leaned back on my perch, wondering if this would kill the Zeruleans' ties to humanity. This should unmask the truth about the Earthlings' long-term goals. Perhaps we could convince the other races to stand with us, but the time spent pleading with them would allow the Arxer to pounce. If the Greys were genuine in their intention, the tide of this battle would turn decisively. The numerical edge was in the Terrans' favor with these new additions. Not to mention the psychological impact the Arxer's presence had, many Federation vessels were panicking at the prospect. We had to break through to orbital range with haste. There's no escape route, and we stand no chance against the Greys. But we can make our deaths mean something to the galaxy, I squawked on the fleet-wide frequency. We must get as many bombs off against Earth as possible. All Federation vessels, charge at max velocity. The Crocodile and our allies bolted forward, right toward the waiting human alliance. The Zeruleans hesitated, not firing on either party. The quadrupeds' reluctance to abet Arxer allies made them the obvious point of entry. Their railguns were powered up, but few of them acted even as we closed in. The Zeruleans came to a decision, and dropped into defensive positions. Plasma arced straight toward us. I saw my life flash before my eyes. The beam sailed just off to our side, and obliterated the neighboring ally that was keeping pace with us. If their aim was half a degree different, that would have been my vessel in tatters. There was no time to gawk at the wreckage left behind, with the Arxer swooping in on any stragglers. While I wasn't proud of the extermination itself, our sacrifice was valiant and honorable. The Crocodile fleet knew that most of us were about to die, but the captains had the commitment to finish the job. The Arxer are swallowing our rear flank, sir. Their ships are gaining on us faster than we can move, Jayla called out. Should we turn and stall them? I puffed out my feathers. Absolutely not. Keep going. According to sensors, the reptilians' maximum speed was much higher than we ever documented. I realized that they had been concealing their technological limits. 2 gray bombers selected us as their quarry and sent drive-tracking missiles in our direction. Jayla shoved the NAV officer out of the way, deploying a stream of interceptors in the nick of time. A Terran robot ship had also spotted us and launched supercharged plasma at our position. We barreled through the Zerulean line with urgency. They were no longer of comparative importance. My sociopath rerouted all power from shields to the engine. The core was already overheating from exertion before this stunt. The female crocodile didn't quite manage to get ahead of the inbound plasma. It plowed into our aft compartment. Alarms began ringing overhead, while crewmates screeched in terror. My readout informed me that steering was offline. The engine was listed as a critical failure. We're stuck on a one-way ticket toward Earth. The ship is going to crash, assuming it doesn't get blown to bits first. All crew to escape shuttles. I shrieked, as loud as I could. The personnel didn't need to be told twice, as the flapping of wings drowned everything out. I took a deep breath. It was up to me to finish the job. We were about 30 seconds from orbital distance, and these 2 bombs could cross a few million humans off the list. Jayla began to abandon her perch, which earned a withering glare from me. Get back here. I know you want to save yourself, but the rest of the crew will kill you for being a predator. I jabbed a talon at her, then pointed to the weapon station. You have no future, no place in society, without me. So you're going to stay right here until the job is done. She hesitated, but was persuaded by my argument. The overhead power flickered out as the engine began to melt nearby systems. The emergency lighting colored the floorboards a dim hue, and only essential functions were available. A plethora of enemies were still chasing our runaway ship. With our shield power rerouted away, there was no disincentive to use kinetics. Arxer bullets plowed through our armor, and the Terran automaton chipped in its own lead munitions. Requesting assistance in the medbay, Zarn panted over the comms. I am unable to carry Thion on my own, nor am I able to fly the emergency medical pod. Captain? Anyone? I sighed. I will be there in a minute. Hold on, Doctor. The Terran robot was recharging its weapons, but struggled to keep up with our unsafe speed. Fear burned through my veins. I offered a silent prayer. That we would survive long enough to complete the mission. It was a few more seconds until we could deploy the antimatter bombs. The human contraption didn't target us from outside a reliable range. Arxer munitions were inflicting steady damage, but they hadn't caused any catastrophic explosions yet. We hobbled into orbital range and established target locks on 2 Terran cities. Jayla slammed her beak on the firing mechanism. I gave her a nod, and we fled from the bridge with urgency. The journey was a blur as we swooped down the evacuation stairwell. Jayla bowled through the door to the medbay, examining a pacing Zarn. The TACCAN doctor had thrown some supplies in his designated shuttle. I was surprised he hadn't just left Thion for dead. The unconscious Farsal had a clump of bandages around his head. It was painful to see him comatose on a cot. You took your time. Zarn spat. I glared at him. We came as fast as we could. I think you of all people would want us to make sure the explosives made it to Earth. The ship rocked around us, barely swallowing a hit from one of our enemies. There was no time for bickering, if we were to survive. The three of us shouldered Thion's weight and deposited him into the pod's rear seat. The doctor strapped the injured patient in, as Jayla and I brought the shuttle online. The vibrations intensified around us, likely from our vessel entering Earth's atmosphere. Without heat shielding on the damaged areas, the main hull was going to be incinerated. Jayla closed the exit hatch, and we jettisoned the shuttle. The controls would have to be learned on the fly. Cerulean skies surrounded us out the window, as we plummeted toward the ground below. The momentum from the ship's breakneck fall had carried over. I wrestled with the control column and tried to steady us. Jayla flung all power to thrusters, but it could only slow us down so quickly. No, no, no. We can't be stranded on a predator's planet. We have to get back up to our fleet. Land was rushing up to meet us much too fast, even as our velocity lessened. Impact looked to be an inevitability. There was nothing I could do to prevent it. My body snapped back in the harness, and our shuttle's belly collided with foreign grass.